Hello, everyone. Today is August 3rd, 2021. I'm here with Larry Chau. Larry is a software development engineer and a computer science graduate from the University of California, San Diego. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Larry.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Karush. Yeah.
So, how has being a software development engineer been? How long have you been a software development engineer?
Let's see. I mean, I graduated in 2015. So what? It's been going on 5 or 6 years now. Yeah. So
How has it been?
I think it's been pretty good. I started at a very small startup, and then I moved to a mid cap company, and then from there I moved on to a pretty big corporate company. So I think I've had all like levels of the spectrum. Uh, yeah. How would you say that? Likewise, we've known each other for quite a bit since college. So you've had kind of that uh, like wide gamut. Like how has your career been up till now? Uh, how would you assess that?
We have known each other for a long time. It's coming up on 10 years now. We've known each
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
Pretty crazy. But it's been good. I have worked for two small companies. Um, it's been about 5 years working as a systems engineer for the first 2.5, and then more of a still a systems engineer, but more of a software development role. And now I've moved on to a much bigger company,
Mhm.
and it's pretty interesting to see the differences, especially compared to my first job,
Right.
which was, a foreign system installation job. And that was a small company, small team. So we had a whole range of tasking that was outside the realm of engineering as well. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what you sign yourself up for when you do the small company work, small
Mhm.
teams. I actually liked it a lot, a lot of good experiences. But now being in the beer company, my tasking is, software engineering,
Mhm.
engineering software, you know,
Because I remember you were an electrical engineer, right, for the most part. So, and I was a computer engineer. Like, how would you say, well, let me go first because I feel like my background in computer engineering and having sort of those mathematical principles, right, that carry over from there, we don't focus on really high level abstractions, right? You know, and I guess this is a multi-part question, but the first one being, like, if you were to do it again, would you be a electrical engineer, or do you regret not just going straight software route, right? Because, and for the audience and the people that don't know, right, UCSD has sort of three central majors to it. There's core computer science, and there's electrical engineering, and there's a mix of two, which I am, which is computer and electrical engineering together, called computer engineering. Uh, Usually, what this means is you do a little more hardware, and you don't take, some classes that otherwise you would take as a computer science major, such as compilers or things like that. You do more digital design, Verilog, and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, how would you say that's kind of shaped your perspective and like what you can do and what things you bring to the table?
that's a good question. I don't know if you remember, my electives in UCSD were in the CSE department.
Mhm.
So my depth actually was software systems, and I was able to take around 6 courses in the CSE department. So I took 11, 12, 100, 101, 20, 21, 110, and
Jeez,
141. So I
jeez.
took
Okay.
8. So I
Okay.
and I kind of did do that computer engineering role, but like instead of being predominantly focused in CSE and then taking a few EC courses, I was predominantly focused in ECE and took a few CSE courses. So I think either or would have been good. I'm just very happy. I remember being in an economics class, lecture one, being in the economics class, sitting on the lecture and being like, I should not be here. Because I had a choice at that point to either take CSE or take economics as my elective.
Uh-huh.
Like, that was a huge, that was one of the best decisions I made in all of college. I mean, maybe being a CSE department right from the get-go would have been a good decision too, but for me and my junior year of college to be like, to recognize that I am, you know, capable and, I would be more
What?
excited. What?
Yeah, I mean, sorry to cut you off, but what like really bothered you about economics though, or was it just not a good fit? Like you knew immediately.
Yeah, I knew immediately because the real issue is that, with electives, as
Uh-huh.
an electrical engineering major, I wanted to take courses I felt like would have helped and sustained my career. And CSE courses did that more so than any other course, more so than the EC courses, more so than any other course, in undergrad. If you want to get valuable skills immediately, the CSE department is the easiest place to do that. And that's the real reason, was because I wanted valuable skills. I already had, that was my junior year, so was applying for jobs and internships, and I recognized, that was probably 2013, 2014. I recognized that there's just way so many software engineering jobs, more so than any other engineering job, more so than any other job. I need to learn how to write code. So
Yeah, I think that's an integral part of just about any job nowadays. Is
yes,
uh, you know, tech is pervasive. It's ubiquitous, right? If you take a finance job, right? If you like, you're going to interface with the computer 9 times out of 10 with any sort of uh, corporate office job, right? So to be able to use the computer and the technical proficiency that you have, right? Like as someone in my background who's grown up with computers for most of my life, right? Like I remember when I was, 6 years old and just playing on my like old like Pentium 3 400 megahertz like little computer, right? Back when Windows 98, Windows Me, and those like pre 2000s era, um, and then I got into hardware. I built my own computer. I got into some networking, like set up my own router, doing, you know, DDWRT, all these things, right? So
what's that?
um, it's like custom router firmware. So like you could, like rooting your phone. Like I know a lot of people do that nowadays. I didn't particularly get into that, but you know, I see that most of the people that grew up and like kind of tinkered with things as they went on, those things paid dividends like later on. Like you don't really know, like it really shapes your perspective. And not to like go off course here, but like to your perspective is much different than like you're sitting in an economics course and you're saying, hey, I don't like, I don't, I'm very glad that I did this one thing that is not like the core of what you do. But for me, the core thing of what I do is computer science. And I'm so glad also that I got to do the hardware side of things, which I feel like gives me a unique perspective. But you're sort of going the opposite way that like, but I guess fundamentally it's the same that there's something that we really didn't regret. And here I'm talking about most of the analog design courses that I took, like as someone, so I guess more than full disclosure here, I do embedded systems, right? So like knowing the hardware is like, and all the ramifications and the physics behind that really took and enabled me to really get into IoT and things like that. So I'm like pretty grateful that that is the case. I think my career would have played out a lot differently if I was just strictly a software person. And would you say that you're the kind of person that you know stumbles into things as they go along and finds things that they're passionate about? Or you say like, did you know like early on, like maybe even sitting in that classroom that you're talking about, like you knew that you wanted to do this one thing, or you knew that you wanted to become like have this particular job title or something like that?
Not in school. In my career, I found a lot more passion and a lot more drive to learn
Mhm.
for the sake of process management, business services. The idea of serving a customer
Mhm.
appeals to me and drives me a lot more than grades than school did.
Mhm.
But yes, finding that passion, being okay with kind of tinkering, being an amateur tinker with whatever technology you're bringing in and adding up your skills over time. It puts, my most recent job, it's, there were a lot of tinkering projects I've taken up in the last 2, 3 years that without those, I don't think I would have been able to, uh,
Be in the
without,
position, yeah,
yes,
like have your current job, have the expertise to do your current job,
exactly.
right?
I don't think I could have, gotten to even understood what the goal was of what my new team is doing, because I wouldn't have gone through so much failure and understood different sort of technologies and how they relate and how a software system works. So, and especially I think we're all pretty lucky today because unlike the old times, like it's hard to be in a lab and test out hardware, but with software, with data, it's like everyone can kind of be an entrepreneur in a sense and gain some skills without having to commit 4 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to a formal education.
Mhm.
And I have a good friend who never went to undergraduate school and now has a full-time salary position as a software engineer. And he may be one of the most intelligent software engineers that I know personally.
So wait, what are you saying? Are you saying that it's we're fortunate that software engineering has enabled these people to be in positions that they otherwise wouldn't be in, or uh, like I'm not sure if I understood that.
I think it's fortunate that almost anyone can be a software engineer and take up the trade of and coding, or the trade of engineering software from their home with almost little resistance. It's pretty much just an individual's willpower, and with those practice, with that skills, they can get a job today.
That's true. But I think most I think most electronics and things like that can be within the same category. Obviously, the barrier to entry for software is next to zero. I think that's kind of what you're speaking to, right? Is
Yes.
You just need a computer. That's it, right? And that's amazing. I think that's pretty amazing. But I think not to underscore or discredit that, like my alarm clock here, like if that thing breaks tomorrow, I can tear it apart and fix it. Like if I know how to wire it together with relatively, like buying a breadboard, well, now Radio Shack isn't a thing, but it used to be. And you can go to Fry's or you can go to Spark Fun or
Fry's
whatever.
isn't a thing anymore either.
Yeah, Fry's isn't a thing That's crazy. Yeah, but no, I mean, I just mean you have a lot of resources. Even Amazon, like you can buy breadboards, small wires, to not huge cost of entry, like very, like by nature's. Okay, well, I mean, electricity is dangerous, but like 5 volt, 3 volt, like type of things, you're not going to hurt yourself. But like chemistry or getting a petri dish, those things requires a fume hood, requires a lab situation. Those things have, I feel like, a huge cost to entry, relatively speaking. And because I have an uncle who is an electrical engineer, and that's how he came up. He just like got interested with things and how they worked internally, and he would pick them apart, right? And then that's like how he got into the trade. Now there's a huge gap between being an electrician and knowing how to, and then designing circuit boards or PCBAs, or understanding the whole process of getting and manufacturing to economies of scale. But I think that's kind of, yeah, that is an amazing part, but also an amazing part of, and I think that is where the industry is heading, is just you can be like the sole role of software engineers now kind of is to deliver product to people with superior domain experience, right? Like all software engineering is about taking an existing domain that some guy at a banking firm, a hedge fund manager or something, has very lot of expertise in finance, or someone in the medical industry. I think that's why software engineering is so core to a lot of things, is because you can switch. You're kind of like the everyman in a lot of situations, right? You can have a lot of, but that doesn't mean that it can apply totally both ways, right? I've seen physicists, right? Because I worked at a laser company for a bit, and like I've seen physicists come down and learn embedded systems, right? So there's sort of cross pollination there, and in fact, a lot of physics principles do carry over to what we do, right? Like if you have a physics degree, if you have, and you specialize in optics, like it's not a far leap across the pond to learn about electrical engineering, get a microcontroller and start tinkering with it. So like I think that's why sort of computer engineering is, or not, but like computer science in general is so sought after. It's so pervasive in all these industries because of that, and for that reason alone. What I think will happen, though, eventually, is you'll have people who are strongly, because you can't live without computers now. So you're going to have these people who are like really strong domain experts, but kind of software engineers on the side, right? So like I go to take I go and get my biology degree, but I'm taking like a lot of like computer science will become foundational. Like some of those principles will integrate heavily into the core curriculum because, why do they teach calculus in high school, right? Because all of these um, people at the college level, it's like it's core learning experience for everybody, right? So, you know, I think that's kind of where we will be headed, and that's pretty cool, I think.
I think so too. And I've heard somewhere like down the line, coding and writing software will be the new truck driving position where it's like it's going to be widely available. There's no shortage of demand for this position, but it's not going to be what it's been over the last 20, 30 years of being this very highly regarded, highly esteemed position. It's going to be more of kind of a, just, I don't want to say manual labor, but kind of a tedious job where there isn't as much.
I totally get what you're
design.
saying. There's the trade skill of being an electrician, right? Like the guy who comes in, fixes up a bunch of wiring. He knows not to touch this kind of voltage or anything.
Yes.
And then there are people who like evaluate structural integrity, like know the NEC by the back of their hand,
Yes.
right? And come in. And so I think we will see segmentation at different levels. And I can tell you right now, like whole part of the organization now is more like the opportunities I've seen, not we as in specifically who I work for right now, but I've seen other companies, right? They hire there's the difference between people. The most valued people are the problem solvers at the top, right? They can take any problem architecturally, find out, right, the person who designs the A series chips, Apple or whatever, right? They have huge breadth of influence. Every decision they make is going to afford hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue, right? But then there are the people as you come down the ladder, right? Like you have like your scope narrows, the things that you do, like so eventually there will be a huge, for every one really experienced, intelligent, like pinnacle of their craft problem solver, there's going to be 10 or 20 different people to kind of fulfill that person's mission, right? And I've seen like they call it scripting now. We've seen IT develop, right? And IT is just, but the problem is right now we're still thinking about exactly what roles and responsibilities, like where to draw the lines, because it's largely a gray area. But that's also awesome because there's a lot of socioeconomic like mobility, right? In that case, like, hey, I see that you're doing this thing really well. You can move on and make broader sweeping decisions within our organization. Like we can trust you to do that. So yeah, I think most of the things that I've seen other companies and us and like the people that I've worked for in the past outsource is mostly like scripting, like basic tasks, right? Like the design and everything is already flushed out, right? And you either hire a contractor or a group of people or outsource it, right? So that's kind of what I've seen. And I think that's kind of the whole industry kind of trying to still figure out like what exactly is the best way to organize things, and that's going to change as you know the customer has different needs, or the just like the general landscape changes, right? There's like tech is all about disruption, right? So we've seen things get like turned over very quickly. So I don't know if I'll ever see that go away. I think within our lifetimes. So.
I don't really want to see it turn away either. I like that, creative destruction, that, tearing down of something old in place of, it's something rising from the ashes that's better, bigger, stronger. And that definitely has to be taken with a grain of salt, because sometimes you can build something worse. But yeah, tech is all about disruption, and that's good. It's meant to optimize our lives. If sometimes people can be resistant to new tech, and it's kind of a shame, because it's, especially if a lot of people are saying you should use this and then you just don't want to use it, and it's like, this can be a catalyst for something pretty good, an optimization that will help you out. And there's definitely I can understand people's skepticism towards tech, because it's sometimes can be overwhelming or overpowering, and that comfort of just staying with the old is sometimes really nice. But tech, I mean, even as an employee of a tech company, it's, you're constantly working to innovate, to create something new, to assist the customer, always thinking about what they need. So it's, it's going to be a nonstop, hopefully. I mean, even for the people who say they don't like tech, like it helps us out a lot. I mean, the software process, the process management that some of the software that's come out in the last 15 years has brought and instilled is amazing. That process management includes things like Uber or Google Maps or Gmail, all of these small little task management things that just make life so much different than it was. Or even being able to review restaurants before you eat there, it's huge. The restaurant can't really be bad anymore. It's tough.
Yeah.
Continue.
No, I mean, but I think though, as sort of like a counterpoint a little bit is like I feel like a lot of this structural building, right? Like if you're constantly renovating, right, there's not a whole lot of potentially like standing on the shoulders of other accomplishments, right? Very much like if we keep throwing away things to rebuild things in their likeness, except with better, we will never get to the next problem that we're trying to solve. Do you think that's, a possibility?
I can sympathize with that point. And it's definitely something that has to be kept in balance, because it's very easy, I personally feel that I can be at fault with that, just continuing to jump from one tasking to another, trying to, add a new skill, innovate a bit. and then leaving a previous tasking behind that, it's really not, the knot isn't tied there. It's not completely set, and I need to go back to it. So it's a balance. But at the same time, I don't like to obsess about one topic for too long, or to even, I don't think that, like, have you ever been in the state where you're, on a problem, even for a software bug or something? It's like you're debugging and debugging and debugging. One of the best things to do is to walk away for me, for like 30 to 60 minutes. Just walk away, do something, grab a meal, go for a walk.
I think there's a lot of credence to that. I mean, one thing I tell a lot of junior engineers is, like once you have all the basics down, right? Like you know how to debug something, you know how to work through a problem, right? Most of us are remembering solutions that we've seen before, right? The real, and I think this is what excites me the most is like software engineering is very much like has a very high ceiling, like any other craft, right? What's fundamentally important is that you understand there are two modes of operation, right? Martin Fowler has a book and has spoken at length about this topic, but he calls it, there's, and I might be misquoting him, it might be a different author, but essentially, there's some companies that are really geared towards being factories, right? Like they iterate on solutions, they have a wheelhouse already that is churning, right? They have a bunch of junior engineers come in and develop new iterative solutions on top of that. But then you have these startups. Fundamentally, what they do is a creative endeavor. And that's what design is, right? Like you have a problem that no one in your org has seen before or has had this, it's just they haven't tripped over that particular problem. So, you sit around, you have a walk, you take a shower, and you have all this kind of stuff churning in your mind. And then one day it just kind of comes to you, right? Like that is fundamentally different process than solving bugs, burning down requirements, things that are like we've been there, done that, right? Like DevOps kind of has come out of this space where there was a lot of initial innovation, like Travis CI, Jenkins and stuff that's still being used today. It's just new methodologies come in and kind of compound and build on top of and make the new the old, so to speak, right? So now, like if you're doing something that people haven't done before, I feel like you're just kind of going out and you're searching for a solution and you're using like all your creative capabilities. It's a creative endeavor versus sort of a logical one, which is one, exciting, but two, very risky. You don't know. You propose an existing solution to something with all the knowledge and background that you have, that you should be willing to accept that it's going to fail to some extent, right? And you should be willing to break it down, revisit things with regards to your customer, and figure out why that is the case. Now, I think there's a huge dichotomy between the acceptance of one of these two things and not treating them as part of two separate worlds, because a lot of I think a lot of people who aren't knowledgeable in this space would probably tell you that, hey, those two, like we can go and do this thing that no one's ever done before, we just apply software engineering to it and we get our solution, right? But I don't think it's that easy. And I think there would be a lot of evidence on the contrary. Like I haven't specifically, I don't have anything that comes to mind, but I'm sure there are plenty of examples.
So you think that startups and their employees have to be designers, more creative, more willing to
take risks. Yes.
Take risks, whereas a junior developer for big companies just debugging, hammering out code, and really just kind of being what we spoke to a little bit earlier, that cog in a wheel, more so than a problem solver.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't happen at startups. I'm not trying to separate big companies from startups. I just mean right now, I think in software, they don't treat those two things as separate, right? Like there's sort of the innovation wheelhouse and there's sort of like the churn and factory wheelhouse. Both are equally necessary. You need to balance your innovation, right? But what you're speaking to is like, yeah, that's more likely to occur in a startup situation. But, big tech does this too. Like, I think that's what separates a tech company from like a company that's not traditionally known as a tech company, right? And let me think of a good example, like Walmart, right? Walmart was not traditionally seen as a tech company, but now they are doing a lot in the e-commerce space, right? I think where they are now, they have a long ways to go to become what they want to be. But if you add, it's a paradigm shift, right? It's a philosophical way of treating things, is like really how you get exponential growth. You treat people who can innovate, people who can treat and design new things separately from, and you have to understand that. Like one thing that I always say is software engineers are very bad at estimation, right? But that's because they're if they are asked to do something that they don't have a lot of upfront granularity about, right? So like a lot of it is this kind of game of telephone between the customer and what exactly you want to build, right? And so that's why they always stress like you got to work backwards from the customer all the time, right? So if you continue to iterate on a solution, you'll eventually get to a solution that the customer cares about. But in that, you're going to hit a lot of milestones about and questioning yourself about how is this the right way to do things? Are we approaching things systematically, right? It's even hard to say that it's probably something or have seen before. You just haven't applied it in that to that facility, right? Like no one ever thought Twitter could be what it is today. I don't know if anybody sat down and conceptualized and thought like this is like we need sort of this really spontaneous you know way of posting messages, right? So that's kind of what I think separates a tech company from a traditional one.
It makes being a tech company very hard because that is, I mean, there's so much room for failure. There's so much room to create tech that's bad or not helpful or difficult to use. And I'm sure the big tech companies have a lot more, trap doors or a lot more, cautionary tape to make sure that whatever software they field works, is safe, is easy to use. Even if it's a dramatic change, they're going to put a lot of time, money, and effort to make sure that that change is worth the effort that they're implementing it for. Whereas, even for a smaller tech company, going to what you said, like, it's tough to think about all those different dynamics of having a piece of technology. And like, there are multiple different pieces of technology. If you have a hardware piece and then you need to bring embedded systems into it, then that's, that barrier of entry also doesn't seem so low. Like, what do you think? I mean, it could be, but there's a lot of education that needs to go into someone before they can create an embedded system. Do you think so, or no?
I mean, I think the barrier to entry is lowered significantly. I think it really depends on what background you come from. But what I think the point being is, like, innovation costs like a lot of money, and it also takes a bit of stubbornness. So
Yes.
You have to like fundamentally believe that what you're doing is like going to be profitable, is going to be successful, and you have a vision for how you're going to carry it out. And you keep iterating on that until you get it into a manifestation that you think people are going to want to buy your product or use your system or what have you, right? That is, I think that's the cost of it, right? And I think not a lot of people are willing to pay that cost. It's not like, there are success stories, right? Someone creates a really successful app, right? But you kind of see sometimes it like flutters, or like the innovation kind of goes away from it because they kind of move on to do something else, right? So that, I think, is a tale that's pretty old, right? Like, it's just like something that is prone to, like, yeah, they just don't know nor can assess like the importance of it. I think it's good to have and big dreams and big aspirations, right? But like, for instance, let's just take Tesla as a success story, right? Like, they fundamentally, Elon at least, believed fundamentally the vision of like an electric future. Like, he didn't think, like, he saw how these things kind of fit together with it, right? Like, batteries, the technology needs to be there. You need charging stations. Like, he thought about the end-to-end solution. He had huge aspirations, if you think about it. And Tesla has been like underwater for like a significant portion of its like it might still be in the red sometimes, like quarterly. So for a long time, you got to be okay with not making a profit if you believe the vision that you're trying to create. And I think it's good to dream big in this, like, kind of this case, right? Like Facebook, right? Like, social media being the construct that it is today would not exist without the idea that Facebook, that MySpace brought to the forefront, right? So, that's kind of the price of innovation. I think that's a critical part, and it's not something that you can measure in dollars very easily. I think that's where people slip up.
No, it's not easy to measure in dollars, and a lot of time it for Elon, like he's a huge brand. Like whether that be, Tesla is still doing very well because people believe in Elon as much as they believe in electric cars, and
Yeah.
they believe in his ability to produce money through that company.
Right.
And Dogecoin is this, another good example. He latched onto a cryptocurrency. He gave it his blessing, and all of a sudden, it shot up in value. So
Right.
those innovators, I think today are even more valuable, even more sought after, will be rewarded even more so than they were 30 years ago with people like Jobs or Gates or, even, I can't believe, did you know that Bezos won Time Man of the Year in like 1999?
No, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
that is crazy. He won Time Man of the Year like 22 years ago.
Dang. Yeah,
Yes.
that's hard to believe. I mean, I guess, yeah, that's, I mean, considering how large Amazon was a company in 1999, that's that's impressive. I
That's
don't know.
impressive. I
I
didn't
don't know.
realize I knew Amazon. I've known Amazon for a long time, but I didn't realize he was that, we were pretty young in 1999, 6 years old or
I
so.
mean, 1999, Amazon was probably still a book company, right? Exclusively.
Yes, it was.
So it was, that's interesting. I mean, well, I mean, like, yeah, I'll go look that up later. It's pretty, that sounds like a good read, at least, like what he got because they have a little blurb about like why he's being nominated or has been given the title of Time, like, is it like the Time Most Influential or just Time Man of the Year? I don't know what that.
Man of the Year, I believe.
Okay. Okay.
I'll have to check that out too, because there's got to be, good reason he might have had the best .com website to come out. I mean, the
Yeah.
rest of the big websites like Google came out a bit later, Facebook and Instagram and Amazon, or sorry, not
Is
all the social medias came out later.
is Google not a .com website though? Like in the .com era?
I think it is, but it wasn't big in 1999, I don't think.
I knew about Google before I knew about Amazon, like leaks and strides. I remember in fourth grade, like I had one of my buddies come up to me and like start Googling things, and we like did a bunch of like mischievous things on the school computer or whatever, right? So
Really?
yeah, like we would just like Google, like E-Bombs World, like all those old little things that like I don't know, just like kid stuff, right? So
Yes.
uh but like yeah, that was a different era, and I remember like early in my vocabulary, Googling something was a common thing. Like, so I don't know. Like, I don't ever remember talking about using Yahoo or anything as a search engine. So, like, yeah, I think that was way earlier in my vocabulary than anything Amazon has done. But that's, I guess, besides the point. Both of those two companies came out of that era. Uh, but what's interesting is Microsoft as a company is like tech companies, tech in general is, well, in this traditional form, right? Like, is not like the tech that when we call it tech, right, today is relatively new phenomenon, I think, right? Like a tech company. And I think Microsoft is the prototype for all of that. And to see it going through like the antitrust stuff and all this stuff, right? And come out still alive and still sort of intact, huge, influential company, uh, you know, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's very cool. It's very interesting, and it gives me a little bit of uh, ease about the future because you don't know the longevity of some of these companies, and to know that a tech giant like Microsoft to have come so far without falling over on itself, becoming like IBM or Yahoo. Not to say that's not in its future, but it would be really cool to see like the Coca-Cola of tech giants, right? Like 100 years of prosperity or whatever. Uh, and I think that's in the cards for a company like Microsoft because like Windows is so ingrained to everybody's like what they do, right? So it's hard to not make that statement, I think.
Do you think Apple will be in that position?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at least with phones and tablets, right? Like, uh, most people, when they think about a phone, they don't think about Android, like, uh, overseas at least, right? Like,
No.
Apple is like iconic and has associated itself as a cultural mainstay and as like a pop icon as well, like pop culture kind of thing, right? So, it's finally ingrained. And what like Apple does really well that I think, like I guess you could make the argument that hey, like Microsoft is the only one in that space if you don't consider Linux, right? But also, like I think Apple is the furthest along on like the whole smartphone operating system, and like Microsoft has tried many a time to like port Windows into a mobile thing without much of a solution. But now, like Apple's very, I don't see that going away really. Like all my parents, all the new generation, like the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about a phone is an iPhone, and I think that's a bit underappreciated because I mean, like I don't know if there's anything you can do on an iPhone that you can't do on an Android phone. So you know, there's that, but I think there are a lot of things still going for Apple that is a bit intangible, like I mentioned, is like this cultural influence, but also because they own their entire stack top to bottom, right? So, uh, and nowhere else, like at least for the immediate future, right? Like an iPhone's the only phone that I can buy that I'm guaranteed like 5 or 6 years of updates and support. So, that is, I think, what drives a lot of people to Apple. And as long as you want a phone that just works, right? Like I've always had, like as a power user of Android, as the owner of an Android phone, right? Like I can understand it's not for everyone, right? Like people who want to kind of manipulate things and like have things specifically their way. That ecosystem plays to a different like niche than like an iPhone. Whereas like my parents will tell me like, hey, I just want to call someone, I just want to text someone. Apple's pretty good 9 times out of 10, and you don't think about all the security flaws or repercussions that might go with that. It just works. So, in that way, they might not be innovating as much as they used to, but they do have a lot still going for them, and probably for them like next 10 years at the very least.
There's security flaws with Apple products.
Yes, but I mean, like there are security flaws on everything. Like most, you know, at least from what I understand in cybersecurity, like the people on offense tend to have a better advantage than the people defending things. Most things that are done defensively are ad hoc vulnerabilities and stuff like that, right? But I mean, they do have people that come and exploit things in an altruistic way. But that's to say that what I mean by Apple being more secure is because they own their entire stack. They develop their own chips, right? They can support and patch things well into the future, and that really gives them the power to extend the longevity of your life of your phone. The problem with Android is everybody's right now beholden to Qualcomm, to Snapdragon processors. If Qualcomm only has a 3-year lease on a certain line of processors, then it makes it much difficult for you to patch security vulnerabilities past that, past the 3 or 4 year mark. And that's why you see a lot of these Android phones and stuff. They only support X number of years of updates, at least from a security perspective.
Oh, wow. So do you switch out phones every 2 to 3 years?
Well, I have a Samsung phone, so Samsung makes their own chips. So, but like the majority of people run Snapdragon processors, as I understand.
Got it.
Yeah.
What phone do you have?
I have a Note 10 with the like Exynos processor, which
How
is
is
like it runs just fine. I mean, like I like the battery life. It's not, it gets the job done. Like it's pretty. Like I'm coming from like a really old phone, so I rarely update my phone to begin with. But when I do, I tend to do a decent amount of research on that. And that's just one of the things that I looked for. I saw that, for one reason or another, Samsung international phones would be like updated, like well into their lifespan. That they might have been like end of life already, but they still update all these old phones, at least promise security patches going forward into the future. And from what I understand, I'm not saying this with any great certainty, but my suspicion is that they can't update or do like kernel level patches or anything like to they don't have much control over the SoC to begin with, that they can't like patch security vulnerabilities at that level if it's some problem architecturally with like an instruction on the chip. They can't like update the firmware to do that. So
What's an SoC?
is a system on chip.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, how long have you had it?
I've had it well, I got it when it was released, so it's about a year and some change. So it's a relatively new phone.
Got it. Wow. That's but it runs Android, right?
Yeah,
Just doesn't have a Qualcomm chip.
that's the only difference. Yeah.
Got it. Well, yeah. I mean, an iPhone is the prototypical phone, and they do have that full stack implementation of their technology, which is probably going to be huge in the coming decades too, I think. What do you think about the full stack? Hardware to software, firmware in between, everything is their product.
Well, because Apple's so vertically integrated, right? They are maybe more resilient to supply chain issues and things like that. Or I guess in some ways you could say that they are more vulnerable if but they always have the option of like getting a different supplier or whatever, right? But I mean, like, there's no secret that there's a chip shortage, right? And in large part, I think it has more to do with politics than I think we'd care to admit here. And that's I think because of the geopolitical situation, it makes sense to that someone like Apple would be more resilient to those kinds of things.
How? how
Well, I mean, like if, as I understand, maybe like Apple outsources a lot of. I mean, I don't really have much. They're very secretive about like who they get their stuff from. But as I understand, Foxconn was a large supplier of Apple for a significant portion of its for a large portion of time. But like, if you own everything and you make everything in house, right, and you control everything, you get to control, what you think is important in regards to the customer. You can control uh, like any supply chain issues that you might have, right? So, like if you rely on China or if you rely on TSM or any of these other places, foreign places, to get you what you need, then that kind of becomes problematic. I mean, you might still rely on some companies to provide you the base materials, but being able to manufacture things in house is pretty important for a company uh, when you're talking about just like potential vulnerabilities, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, sometimes people will say that's just more work in your own company where you could contract it out. I've heard that argument too, but if you like, Steve Jobs was all about his products. He really wanted to produce the best product available, the best product possible. And that involved a full stack implementation of his technology. And yes, it seems, if you have to implement that, you've already gone through the painstaking hassle that an individual who contracted out all of that work instead of going through that, time and effort and risk at the beginning, you've already put that cost down. And, you know, I think it's a high risk cost and it might not play out to, when you can contract out so many different aspects of your product. But he did it. He thought it was important. I think it's important too, especially for things as sensitive as phones,
Mhm.
and laptops and tablets. You want that to be as secure as possible.
Yeah, I
But
think that's what I think that kind of will bleed into the staying power of what they can do over the next, decade or so, especially given, like I mentioned, the geopolitical situation, right? So, yeah, totally understand why that would happen. So how
it,
are
what?
so yeah, I mean, I was just like, I guess, yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense. Like, to be in the situation Apple's in with a lot of revenue, a lot of money, with not a lot to do with it, is that you would like kind of vertically integrate as much as possible. Um,
Yes. Well, we'll see where it goes. It'll, the state of tech and the state of products and work processes over the next 10 years should be pretty interesting to see and observe.
totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all interesting to see how this plays out because we're all sort of living in an interesting timeline to say the least. We'll have you noticed that, like, like how would you say uh, you're in San Diego right now, right?
Yes.
Would you say that like tech is moving out over there, or like how would you say
No,
it's like the work from home situation and everything has affected you?
there's an influx of San Franciscans here. San Diego was one of the like the prices of homes here were one of the highest to rise in the entire country.
Hmm.
And work from home's been great for me. My new job's work from home, so I'm enjoying that. And you know, it's different, but I know the tech here is still strong, the biotech's strong, and the defense tech here is pretty solid. But I don't feel like there's been any outflux with UCSD there. There's still a lot of quality companies all around. And I think California is still a very strong state to live in and work in.
Do you think fundamentally like tech will change with like how work from home is like now a thing, or
I think, I think so. I think it depends. I think so. I think it's going to change. I think it'll be hard for things to completely shift back to normal, especially when a lot of companies were trying to shift back into normal, and then we have this Delta variant out now, which is just another reason to consider staying from home and really determining what is mission critical, and especially when you consider about the ease of traffic and all of that. And Southern California has such a bad traffic issue that I think that being solved is a huge win for the community. So we'll see where it goes. Do you have anything outside of work you're excited about, Larry? Any, now that COVID lockdowns are kind of wrapping up, anything you're excited about in the world?
I mean, I'm just like really happy to actually finally get out,
Yes.
That's kind of I think a lot of the I think humans need like a level of interaction, like to see people physically, right? Like being in Zoom calls all day, or like um, things like that is not really a way to live, in my opinion. So that's really like that I think that's kind of the what's important, like at least for the immediate future, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Like,
It is.
how do you go ahead?
Yes, it is important. Working from home. Yeah, and even the lockdowns, it wasn't socially acceptable to go outside too long, or just even be friendly and say hello to a stranger. It was always strange to do during the last year and a half. So, and like you said, it's no way to live sitting in a home and doing Zoom calls all day and not actually interacting with a real human being. That's definitely no way to live. So, I mean, I enjoy working from home, and I kind of have my outlets to get my human interaction. Maybe go to a coffee shop, maybe go to the dog park and talk to some other dog owners. But
Oh, you have a dog.
oh yeah, I have a dog. I've had a dog for 6 months now.
Nice.
She's
So
what?
what is she? Like what breed?
They called her a cattle dog terrier mix.
Okay. She's the small one, I'm guessing.
She's like 40 pounds, 40, 50 pounds. Not too small. She's kind of a little rascal. She likes to eat things that she shouldn't eat. So, yeah, I have to deal with that.
I'm trying to think, like from the time we last talked, right? And and now, right? Like not a whole lot, like
It wasn't
personally
that long
speaking.
ago.
It wasn't, but I feel like we didn't get like a full 9 yards of the entire conversation, right? Like in terms of, like tried to cover maybe like 5 or 6 years or whatever in the span of 2 hours, right? So, yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, like things, like I'm still sort of the same person, right? Like I can't really think of any new things I've picked up beyond like, just being so invested in my work, being like someone who consumes a lot of media,
What type of
and
media?
like movies and like TV shows and books and all sorts of things, right? So uh
What are some of your favorites right now?
like TV shows or like movies. Like I just watched a movie the other day. What was it called? Um it's called The Green Knight. Have you ever seen that?
I've heard of it. What is it about?
It's about like one of King Arthur's like uh it's kind of based off of this fairy tale, um where uh like the whole like theme of it is like to be sort of an honest person, and at the onset of the movie he's like a person who doesn't have like a lot of ambition, but is kind of put in this precarious situation where um, so someone comes in like this like knight who's like kind of this mythical creature and says like if you can cut off like a limb of mine or do whatever you want, but I will have to return, that in kind to you a year from now. So he comes, he lops off the guy's head, right? And the
Wow.
guy like picks up his head, like because he's like uh, kind of this mythical creature. He picks up his head and like rides off and says like, just remember a year from now I get to cut off your head or whatever, right? So like he just sitting there kind of dealing with it for a whole year, and then he decides like to make this journey because like he and it's all like the psychological, like it's a really trippy movie, but like it's a lot of psychological duress for him to come to terms with the fact that he's just like walking to his death. So it deals with a lot of the themes of like being a good person, being an honest person, uh, doing things that are right, but you don't necessarily want to do, right? So, obviously he doesn't want to die, but he made a promise to this, person to do this. So, you know, I think those kinds of movies are very interesting and very thought provoking. I think those are the ones that I kind of gravitate towards. But yeah, how about you? What have you, anything that you're particularly into recently?
I'm currently reading the book The Wise Man's Fear. Have you heard of it?
No,
Or
what is it?
The Name of the Wind?
No,
It's
how does it wind like this?
kind of a fantasy book of a young boy who the name of the wind is the first and the wise man's fear is the second, but it's a fantasy book about a young boy, and I don't want to spoil anything, but he goes through a pretty traumatic event and then has to go to a university, and then is you know get kicked out of the university, and then he has to go off and fend for himself and do some real world stuff. And I it I'm close-ish to the end of the book, and it's really entertaining. I mean, it's just a really good read. So I'm really liking that. And I'm about 200 or so pages away from the end, so I'm excited.
What like have you picked up more reading in your spare time now that like you're kind of at home with not much to do, or like what have you found yourself gravitating towards?
When I did a lot of traveling, I started reading a lot because in those, 10-plus hour plane rides, it's just can't watch movies the whole time. So I picked up reading, and I've been reading a lot for the last 4 or so years, but definitely since lockdowns, a lot more reading. Last year, right when we started lockdowns, I was reading like crazy. This year too, a lot of reading. Um, and it's fiction or nonfiction, a lot of nonfiction, but
Mm.
I'm particularly liking this book. Have you had any good reads recently?
I mean, I usually get like a couple chapters into something interesting and then I'll let go of it. But I have a book here. Maybe I put it away, but it's called like Extreme Leadership. That one's
Oh,
interesting. Have you
wow.
read that?
No, who's it by?
It's like this guy off the Joe Rogan podcast.
Extreme Ownership,
Ownership, yeah.
Jocko Willing.
Yeah, yeah. That one's an interesting one. Have you read that?
No, I haven't, but it's very famous
Oh, is it?
with Joe
Okay.
Rogan fans. Yes,
Oh, okay. Really? I mean, I remember watching his TED talk, and I thought that one was really interesting. So I thought, at
Jocko.
least, yeah, Jocko's, yeah. Uh, like maybe I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I do think leadership is an interesting topic. So that's kind of why I picked it up. And
It
also, I've
is.
been like listening to a lot of podcasts. Have you picked up? There's this one called Flying Coach. Have you ever heard of Flying Coach?
No,
This
what's
is
it
it's on the
about?
Spotify. They bring in like different coaches, like NBA coaches, like NFL coaches, right? Like Greg Popovich was on there, John McVay, various other um, people, right? And they talk about like I think what's that guy's the coach from Seattle, the
Pete
Seahawks coach,
Carroll.
Pete Carroll. Yeah, they talk about leadership mostly. They mostly talk about. I mean, they talk about a lot of things, but a mainstay focus has been like how do you develop people? Like how do you get the most out of people? I think that's a really interesting topic because um, it's something I can relate to, right? Having like led small initiatives, teams, right? Mentored people. So, like being in that position is important, but also like if you ever plan on, you know, like having children or uh, being like someone in like crucial decision making situations, uh, like you want the best out of like yourself and the people around you, right? So, kind of that part I think is pretty exciting. Um, but that's something I've been actively listening to here and there. Obviously, I listen to a lot of sports podcasts, things like that. Um,
Leadership is pretty important, and it's very underrated. And it doesn't take. Everyone can be a leader, and it doesn't mean being abrasive or being loud.
yeah,
That was a good point. Good aspect of leadership is knowing who to have around you and who to not have around you, and who is serving you positively and who is serving you negatively. And it's not easy to implement changes in life based off of those assessments.
right. I think it's to really know like the people, right? Because like software engineering is about people, I think, more than it is sometimes about technical aspects, right? It's
Yes.
it's what you it's whether you understand, like, know how to read the room, cultural situations are more important towards the overall well-being of your people, the overall like productivity, like, just having, like, you're so, like, we're all psychological people and we all do the jobs that we do are way more psychological than physical labor, right? Then, but we're not really emphasizing the mental health of it, right? So I think that's uh, pretty clear from like all the things I've read, all the things that I've understood is you have to know how to foster a good culture and be like a really be positive even in the situations where you're not feeling your best, right? Just to be a leader, to uh, do the if you do those kinds of things, I think uh, you don't need to be the best person in your like field. You don't need to be the smartest person, the most technical. Uh, you just need to be empathetic. I think that's the most important thing is uh, people want to work with you not because you can churn out things, right? Like they want to work with you because you're a person, and they want to work with you. Like whether it's for one reason or another, people find their reasons, but very rarely is that reason. This guy is like the best person for the job. They just, you know, I think most of the time people when they work with each other has to do with common interest and like passion about something, right? And less about um, is this guy going to get the best, like, are we going to make the best thing? I'm not putting in the A team for like software engineering, right? And I don't think people should expect that.
No, it's empathy goes a long way, and being empathetic helps, you get on the same page with other people, and that creates, you know, synergy and really makes the job a lot easier. If you're really intelligent but not able to communicate, or even not even communicate but be empathetic and get on the same page as other people, a lot of roadblocks are going to be put up, and it's going to be stressful, and people don't want stress, and they don't want to feel anything short of heard and respected.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're heard and respected, then you know I feel like they'll be more willing to help you and help you reach your goals, and then if you help them reach their goals. It just feels good too at the end of the day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not even to say it's good work ethic or good work practice. It just feels good compared to being non-empathetic, not understanding, not willing to understand or take the time to get on
Mm-hmm.
other people's level, and then you're not able to communicate well or get in sync, and then both of you are both of whoever they are not having as fruitful of a time as they could be.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, Larry, thank you for coming on the podcast. Are there any last words that you'd like to tell or say to everyone?
No, I mean, I guess stay safe out there.
Thank you, Larry.
Yep. Yeah, it was a pleasure coming on. Um, I think we touched on a lot of good points. And yeah, just anytime.